It's amazing. This is Armistice Weekend. Of course, started as the celebration of the day that was meant to be commemorating the massive sacrifice in the war that was to end all wars. A really, to a great extent, wrong-headed war, the First World War. Could it have been sorted out by diplomacy? Could the Kaiser have been restrained other ways than having to send millions of young men to their deaths in France and Belgium and obviously in Gallipoli and around the world? Who knows? But the reality is it was a catastrophe for Western civilization. And to a great extent, Western civilization has never fully recovered from the First World War. All the optimism, all the technology, all the breakthroughs that were happening around the turn of the 20th century, all wiped away. The Bolshevik revolution came out of it. To a great extent, Nazism came out of it. So when we look at, and I'm not saying that we were wrong to fight against the Kaiser. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, was the war prosecuted in a way that could have saved a lot more lives? And I think the answer to that is probably yes. It was industrial scale massacre. And a lot of it was down to ineptitude and not understanding the new technology that was available. And now, the irony of all this is the supposedly liberal left-wing Prime Minister Keir Starmer, we know he's just a communist. He's neither liberal or tolerant. He's a tyrant. And the tyrant has gone out to meet another little tyrant, Napoleon or Macron, in Paris to talk about Ukraine. And this is what really worries me. And last week we had the amazing, fantastic result in America where Donald Trump became the 47th president of the United States. And celebrations across the free world among people that love freedom. And we are being bullied and intimidated by an authoritarian liberal elite. I've had this happen to me personally. It's happened to thousands, probably millions of people across the Western world. And now these people are actually putting our lives in danger. I'll explain what I mean. Starmer, and the insult of this, Starmer is going out on Armistice Day to discuss with Emmanuel Macron how they can manipulate the demented old lunatic in the White House, Joe Biden, into allowing them to fire Storm Shadow missiles into Russia. Now, why is that important? And by the way, I absolutely fully support the right of the Ukrainian people to self-determination and to defend themselves against Russian aggression. I'm not a Putin fan. But what I am is someone who's pragmatic and says what's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the minute is just filling lots and lots of body bags. And I 100% support Donald Trump's efforts to try and bring peace to Ukraine. And that might mean some hard decisions on all sides, for sure. But if it stops tens of thousands of young Ukrainian and Russian men dying every single month, then it's probably a price worth paying, because at the minute we're not paying in blood. But that might well change if Macron and Starmer get the way. And again, I've friends that are actually actively involved in supporting the Ukrainian effort, and I 100% support them in the efforts that they're making. And again, I'm not going to go into any more detail on that, but I've spoken about it before, and I've got friends who used to do undercover work in Northern Ireland who have actually moved to Ukraine. They're living in Ukraine and getting involved in defending the Ukrainian people. And I think that's commendable. But this is the point. The idea of firing cruise missiles, this, in the Cold War, this would not have even been discussed. It would have been absolute insanity. In Afghanistan, we never fired cruise missiles into Russian territory. The West supplied the Taliban, or the Mujahideen as they were called then, which again was probably a mistake in hindsight, with surface-to-air missiles, SAM missiles to shoot the helicopters down. They provided them, I think, with Milan anti-tank guided missiles, if I remember, probably tow missiles. So they did give some heavy-duty kit to the Taliban and help the Taliban, and British and American special forces fought alongside the Taliban in the Mujahideen in the 1980s against the Russians, and it was successful. Now, the idea of firing missiles deep into into Russian territory. Putin has said, if that happens, he will class it as an act of war and he will launch nuclear strikes. He said that. He said that. And Starmer and Macron are willing to gamble not just Russian and Ukrainian lives, as valuable as they are. Starmer and Macron are willing to gamble your life and my life. Nuclear weapons are real. They work and they can kill billions of people. There's a book I've kept talking about it. My son's now reading it at the minute. It's called Nuclear War: A Scenario. And it goes into great detail about what happens when a nuclear war is started by lunatics and the outcome of that. And that is what we're looking at if this conflict is not managed properly. Like I say, I'm not a peacenik. I am not a cheese-eating surrender monkey. The French are, incidentally, but I'm not. The reality is I absolutely believe that people have a right to defend themselves. But when there are red lines that have been set, even by a madman, in the current state of affairs, when Russia has 6,000 nuclear weapons that it can launch at a moment's notice, and America and Britain have slightly less, but still enough to destroy Russia and to destroy the world, things can escalate very quickly. And there's nothing we can do. All we can do is sit and watch from the sidelines. But what we can do, we can call this out. And we can say, we know that Starmer's a lunatic. We know he's low IQ. We know he's dangerous. We know he's a tyrant. We know he's a psychopath. But the question is this: is he crazy enough to start World War III? Because that's what's at stake here. And I've been worried about this for a long time. I've done a lot of videos on this. And again, like I've said, I'm not against the Ukrainian people defend themselves. If some lunatic invaded the UK, 100% we defend ourselves. I hope we would anyway. But it's not our job to launch cruise missiles. And it would be British soldiers launching those missiles without a shadow of a doubt, because the Ukrainians don't have the technology or the ability to launch them. And even if it's not British soldiers, it's British kit. This is crazy. And the only reason that Starmer and Macron are trying to do this, they want to precipitate a major conflict, in my opinion, between Russia and the West before Biden slips out of power and into his old people's home, so that they can have leverage on Trump and make Trump look like a weak man if he tries to sue for peace. But I'm telling you now, this is a very, very dangerous policy if they start throwing those cruise missiles about, those Storm Shadow missiles. And it could lead to a nuclear war. Let's just be frank about it. It could lead to a nuclear war. Everybody dies in a nuclear war. Don't for a minute think that you're going to be able to survive a nuclear conflict. You're not. Your family, my family, Western civilization, in fact global civilization, is finished. Maybe someone living on a Fijian island might just be able to eke out some sort of existence. The consequences of a nuclear holocaust are obscene. And these lunatics are willing to gamble with my life and your life with little or no mandate. What I would say, I'm always harping on about this, same as I have with Tommy: write to your MPs, write to your politicians. Try and get these absolute nutcases restrained. And again, this is what happens when we make mistakes in the electoral process and we allow an extreme left-wing totalitarian government to gain power in the UK. Never forget who Starmer is. Never forget his roots. Never forget his Trotskyite roots. Never forget that he was getting trained out in the Eastern Bloc in the 1980s. When we were joining the army and serving in the military, he was getting trained by the Russians. Just never forget that. Guys, this is serious. It's a dangerous situation that we're in. Last week we were on a high. This week we're in a situation where the deep state are having their last gasps at trying to destroy our lives before Donald Trump takes power. And I hope that Donald has enough influence now to rein these lunatics in and tell them, if they do this, that once he gets power, if we get there, that he will take action against them. And I'm just appalled. I'm absolutely disgusted and appalled that a British Prime Minister is putting British citizens at risk of a nuclear attack from Russia. Absolute madness. See you all soon.